So good evening, everybody. And once again, we are back with day 9 of this session of Civils Daily called Daily Answer War and Daily Answer War Prime. So basically, we are practicing the answer writing for UPSC mains, and we are trying to cover some of the PYQs right now in the previous few sessions. So again, in the morning session, we had given you a question in the Telegram group, and some of you have written quite good answers, and I have seen some of those answers. And in this session, we will be trying to discuss that question, evolve a framework to write the answer to that question, like how we could have progressed in the exam, and then we will try to check some of your copies and analyze like what is going wrong or what is going good for answer writing from our point of view or from our purposes for the exam. So let us start the session, and the question was about from GS3. This was again a 2022 question, and basically from the section on environment, and it was a pretty crisp question, and it had some like specific demands that we needed to address in this question. The question was discuss in detail the photochemical smog, emphasizing its formation, effects, and mitigation. And next, we had to explain the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol. So this was a bit surprising question for students because this 1999 Gothenburg Protocol is not much in news, and many people tend to ignore it if you don't go through the static portion and just go through some of the agreements, major agreements that have gone through when we have embarked upon our like environmental and climate change journey. You will, if you don't go through that section, you will most probably miss this protocol, and then it would have been like tough for you to write this in the exam hall. But if you had some idea about this protocol, basically like what it overall relates to, you could have come up with a decent answer. The first part was quite easy because we read a lot about photochemical smog, and the question clearly asks three things: that is, how it is formed, what are the effects of photochemical smog, and what are the measures that we can take to mitigate this photochemical smog. So I think these three parts were very sufficient. If you could write these three parts decently, I think the first part of the question was done. And in the next part, you just had to talk a bit about Gothenburg Protocol, like what it was, what its major objectives were, what its aim was, and what it basically related to. So if you could have even talked about that, like 4 or 5 lines, I think you should have got decent marks in this answer. So we'll look at our answer and see what all we could have written, starting from like the same perspective, starting from introduction, and then we will go for the body of the answer, and then we will try to conclude. So that will be the process in this answer, and after that we will go for evaluating your copies. Good evening, Harji. So the question, meanwhile, you can also ask your doubts in the chat box if you have any. So let us start the answer. So in the introduction, we could have just defined this photochemical smog as is our like ritual, you can say now. So photochemical smog, also known as Los Angeles smog, is a mixture of pollutants that are formed when nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds react to sunlight, creating a brown haze over cities. So I think I try to just make this definition as crisp as I can. Uh, you could have written multiple things, but since we have to discuss like formation effects and mitigation of this photochemical smog in the next part, so I think just giving a contextual introduction would have sufficed here. So basically, if you look at smog, it is of two types. One is Los Angeles smog, and one is London smog. So the London smog is the one which we usually see in winters, the combination of that smoke and fog that get forms, and visibility gets low, and like it is usually seen in winters in northern cities of India. So that is basically the London smog. But this question, the photochemical smog, it is called as the Los Angeles smog because it was found in the city of Los Angeles, and now it is pretty common even in our northern Indian cities like Delhi. It is a very common phenomenon, and it is basically due to pollution, and it is on the ground level and reduces the visibility by forming a brown haze over the cities. Like whenever you might see the pictures of New Delhi in pollution, you will realize that there is a haze formed around the city, and visibility gets very low. So that is what is photochemical smog. Uh, Talking about its constituents, it is basically comprised of ozone like O3, and then there are some peroxy nitrates PANs. So PANs and aldehydes are also present in very small amount, but mainly it is ozone that is present in this photochemical smog, like ground level ozone. So O3 is the main constituent of this uh, photochemical smog. So we will now see how it is formed. So first, let us talk about how it is caused. So the major causes of this pollution, as you can guess correctly, I think, is vehicular pollution. The vehicles release a lot of nitric oxides, NO3, and volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and that is a major cause of this photochemical smog. And also next, we can find from industrial pollution, the fumes are released, and that also contains a lot of nitrogen oxides as well as VOCs. Then construction activities, stubble burning, all of the pollution causing events that happen and that are pretty common knowledge are the major causes of the formation of this photochemical smog. So next, what is the process of the formation? So when we talk about the process, it is basically sunlight acts as a catalyst here. It is formed when nitrogen oxides, primary pollutant, and volatile organic compounds react together in the presence of sunlight to form ozone. So what happens is, if you look at the formula of nitrogen oxides, it is basically NOx. So that oxygen gets separated from NOx due to sunlight, and then that combines with the oxygen present in the atmosphere, O2, and that forms the ozone. Along with it, some PANs are also formed. Nitrates in very small amount are also formed that are also present in photochemical smog. So the formation is closely related to the concentration of primary pollutants and the secondary pollutants. So if the primary pollutants will be more, the formation will be more. So basically, after that, we could have just drawn a simple diagram to show the formation that would have made our work very easy. You need not explain a lot of things. Just if you could have drawn the diagram, I think that would have been very good, and also that would have impressed the examiner and given you some extra marks. For example, in this diagram, you can see that ultraviolet rays from the sun is falling, and from the vehicles from the industry, these NO, NO2, NOx basically is released, and also from burning of fossil fuels, hydrocarbons are released, that is volatile organic compounds. And after this, when the sunlight falls on these compounds, all of these react. The photochemical reaction takes place, and then this photochemical smog is formed. So this is basically consisting of ozone O3, and along with it some aldehyde, acrolein, and PANs are also present, but these are present in very small quantity. The main constituent is this ozone only. So this was the diagram that you could have drawn. You could have just no need to draw the vehicles and all. Just draw a line diagram, and I think that should have been very good for this answer. Next, we move on to talking about the next two parts that are again exclusively asked in the question, that is effects and mitigation. So effects are also pretty common. Like if you go through any basic environment book or material, you will know about the effects of photochemical smog. You could have just divided into the effects on multiple things. For example, effects on human beings, effects on animals, effects on environment, effects on materials. So along those lines, this effects could have been divided if you had no idea like how to proceed with the effects. So mainly, the first and foremost is reduced visibility. That this is a very common knowledge effect. It causes a light brownish coloration of the atmosphere and reduced visibility, which leads to accidents in many northern cities during winter. Irreversible damage on the lungs and heart. So the health effects include like irreversible damage on the lungs and heart, causes painful irritation of the respiratory system, irritation in eyes, and difficulty in breathing. So these things are also very common, which you could have mentioned. Next is about environmental effect. So there are multiple plants such as tobacco, tomato, and spinach that are highly responsive to ozone, and it can decimate these sensitive crops, trees, and other vegetations. Then there is the effect on materials also. Here you could have also added the effect on many animals, although almost similar effect on humans and animals. This photochemical smog has. Next, you can talk about effect on materials. So ozone can cause the cracking of rubber, the reduction in tensile strength of textiles, fading of dyed fibers, and cracking of paint. So these are the major effects that could have mentioned. I think three, four of these were pretty common knowledge. I think if you have read a bit of environment or science and tech, I think you should have gone through these things. Next, we talk about the mitigation of this photochemical smog. So the first and foremost idea uh, that should come to your mind when we talk about mitigation is reducing these pollutants in the atmosphere. So two or three points you can just pick from there and mention that reducing this pollution can help in the mitigation. So some of those points are mentioned here also. For example, this reduction of nitrogen oxides, reducing vehicular pollution. So all of these are those basic points only which you could have added. After that, you could have also mentioned something about catalytic converters. So this is a scientific concept. In this, it can reduce vehicle emissions of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and hydrocarbons. So what happens is it catalyzes oxygen and then it is released. So like from when while releasing only it converts into nitrogen. Next, you can talk about use of biofuels. So they reduce greenhouse gas emissions and noxious urban emissions from transport. Next, you can talk about reduction of nitrogen oxides using less air in combustion, lowering temperature of combustion by using processes such as two-stage combustion and flue gas recirculation, water injection, or by modifying the designs of the burner. We can reduce the emission of nitrogen oxide. This is basically for the industrial pollution. Like when fumes are released from industry, we can modify the design of the burner or reduce the flue gas circulation. By increasing the flue gas recirculation, we can reduce the release of nitrogen oxides in the atmosphere. And the last point, again, as I mentioned, is about vehicular pollution. So these were some of the mitigating measures that we can take in order to control the photochemical smog. So this was the first part of the question, and I think all these three parts were pretty basic. And if you had the knowledge of ozone, if you have studied the chapter on ozone formation and the very like many protocols and all we study about ozone layer. So if you have gone through those, I think you must have come across this photochemical smog, and from that you could have just written these three parts. Next, we move on to talking about the Gothenburg Protocol. So in the question itself, they have mentioned 1999. So from there only you could have taken a cue, like it was uh, it came into like talking in 1999. So the first for the first time it was adopted in the year 1999. The protocol was adopted by the countries of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, that is UNECE. So this is a body for Economic Commission of Europe of the United Nations, and the parties to it are basically most of the European countries. So this protocol was adopted in 1999, and its aim was to abate acidification, eutrophication, and ground level ozone. So this was the basic aim that you could have mentioned. If you could have just written about ground level ozone, that you should have derived when you read about this question. I think that was pretty basic knowledge. Like when you are writing about ozone photochemical smog, the question must relate to something about abating of ozone only. So even if you had not the complete knowledge, you could have come to this point. Next, we talk about the objectives. So the objectives of this protocol was to control and reduce emissions of sulfur dioxide, SO2, nitrogen oxides, NOx, ammonia, NH3, and volatile organic compounds that are caused by human activity. So these were the four basic uh, chemicals that was supposed to be contained by this protocol, that is SO2, NOx, NH3, and VOCs. But later in 2012, like they amended it and included black carbon and particulate matter PM in their list of compounds that they needed to like reduce or abate. So you can mention that also. Next, we talk about to ensure that atmospheric depositions or concentrations do not exceed critical load levels. So basically, they had given a target, and the parties were asked to stick to those levels of emissions. The parties gave priority to implementing measures to reduce particulate matter to sources that are significant sources of black carbon to provide benefits for human health and the environment and to help mitigation of near-term climate change. Basically, there were four compounds, that is this NOx, SO2, uh, volatile organic compounds, and NH3 ammonia. So these four compounds they gave targets to the countries participating in this protocol to reduce and like to reduce their emissions levels too, so that they can help in controlling the formation of ozone and various other polluting things like eutrophication and other ocean acidification, water acidification, all of those things they try to control. So basically, you had to talk about these four compounds, and later, if you remembered, you could have added that particulate matter and black carbon was also added to this list. So next point also talks about that only basically emissions limits. It set emission ceilings for four pollutants. It was updated into 2012 to include particulate matter and black carbon. Other than it, you could have written multiple things. For example, you could have gone into details of what is the target or what are the levels and which all countries were there. But I think there was not that much scope. They just wanted to surprise the candidates and just wanted to test whether the person is able to think on his feet and just come up with something related to ozone or has just a basic idea about this Gothenburg Protocol. Other than that, I don't think they wanted to check the details of actual knowledge here, because the question was very uh, overall. The question was a 10 marker, and they already had asked multiple things about photochemical smog in the first part. So anyway, there was not much scope to write about this protocol. So if you could have just remembered the basic features of the protocol, the implementing agency, the aims and objectives, I think that was sufficient. So this was the about good second part of the question, that is Gothenburg Protocol. And after that, we just try to conclude. Basically, you could have argued for a way forward here, but since the mitigation of photochemical smog is basically a type of way forward only I tried to uh, avoid writing a next way forward, because most of the points again would have been common only. You must have written about the reduction in pollution and then talking about renewable energy, biofuel. So I have talked that in the mitigation part itself. So there was no need to write a way forward separately. You could have just concluded. In addition to the initiatives being taken by the governments, the need of the hour is to bring all stakeholders in the society together to combat the formation and effects of photochemical smog. So there are steps being taken by the governments. For example, in India also we see there are multiple efforts to control the pollution. For example, in Delhi you can see they have come with National Clean Air Program. Then there is Graded Response Action Plan. So you could have included those initiatives if you wanted to, but I think this was not restricted to Delhi or India. I think I decided to go a bit broad. So multiple initiatives are taken by the governments. There are smog towers that are erected even in cities like Delhi, Beijing. So you could have talked about that also. But other than that, we need to like bring all stakeholders together. By stakeholders, I mean the people from the society. Like people themselves need to understand the importance of remaining pollution free and like the harmful effects of photochemical smog. So awareness can be released and awareness can be increased, and also we can need to bring the private players, for example the players from the industry or the corporate world, and uh, together all of these pillars like people, society and the government can together decide to implement some measures to reduce the photochemical smog. So this is basically type of future. Next we move to looking at some of the copies that you have submitted. So first and foremost we have Varsha's copy. Smog is formed due to the combustion of primary pollutants. Okay. Smog, photochemical, London smog, burning of sulfurous compounds. Okay. So here, when you are talking about London, it is better you write Los Angeles because both are named after cities, and that is how they have been like classified in most places. Photochemical smog is formed when nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds result sunlight to form ozone and other oxidants. So this is fine. Formation, okay. Photochemical smog, good. I think you have drawn very good diagram. So this will be good, but you can just explain it also. This photochemical forms from nitrogen oxides and water. So, okay, fine. You have explained it here only. I think this is good, and there's no need to like draw plane and all, because I think this must. Next, dissociation of nitrous oxide and nitrogen dioxide takes place in sunlight. Then they combine with hydrocarbons. Okay, factors affecting photochemical smog. We were talking about topography, temperature inversion. Okay, topography influences the amount of dispersion that take place due to the movement of air mass. Temperature inversion result in pollution being trapped due to, okay, fine, effects reducing eyesight and shortness of breath, plant damage from carcinogenic oxidation. Is good. I think rather than this part, I think effects and mitigation could have been explained a bit better. Although this part could have been shortened a bit because the question is specifically asking the effects and mitigation. So here you could have explained a bit, like mentioned some of the problems, health problems that happen. Next, you could have mentioned some of the plants which are like more. Which tend to get more damaged due to photochemical smog. Next, you could have mentioned about like materials, cracking of rubber, paints, etc. So, like carcinogenic point, this could have been explained a bit better. Mitigation, switching on to hydrogen powered and electric vehicles, usage of biofuels to, okay, implementation of air quality regulation, okay, okay, fine, switching on clean air. So this is good. I think most of the measures related to pollution you can write here, and I think you have done that itself. So this is okay. Gothenburg Protocol 1999 adopted by United. Okay, fine. Set limits on air pollution, including sulfur. Okay, to ensure that atmosphere. So here you can talk about black carbon and particulate matter also, that was added in 2012 to ensure the atmosphere depositor do not exceed the implement measures to reduce particulate matter sources of black carbon. Okay. The photochemical smog is caused primarily by anthropogenic attempt, and out of 10, you must get 5 marks in this answer. Next, we move to Joya's copy. Discuss in detail the photochemical smog is a type of visible air pollution. It occurs when sun's UV rays react with nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds to form secondary pollutants like ground level ozone. Okay, fine. Formation occurs mostly in urban areas experiencing high occupying in summers and temperatures. Okay. Photochemical smog, nitric acid, aldehyde. Okay, this is a good diagram. Just a bit more clarity could have you could have maintained. For example, when you are talking about ground level ozone, talk about all the pollutants here because photochemical smog basically consists of all of it. I think you have just made it broad and mentioned this. Okay, this is decent. These of chemical reactions takes place in the presence of sunlight, resulting in brownish colored haze. Okay, affects health on plants, on animals. This is good. Mitigation emissions from anthropogenic reduced by increasing environmental use of public transport. Again, here you could have like basically explained what are catalytic converters, like how they will reduce vehicular emissions. Party to the protocol, government has taken many initiatives to mitigate photochemical smog. Go for bringing all the stakeholders of the society together for in order to reduce this menace further. So that would have been a more apt conclusion. So overall, I think you have written also a very good answer, and 5 out of 10 is you must get in this answer. And some things that you could have improved is like talking about this protocol in a better manner. You could have talked about separately aims and objectives and also talked about the 2012 amendment that I think you have missed there. And other than that, you could have just mentioned this part a bit better. So that is it for today, guys. And again, we will meet tomorrow with a question, and in the evening, we'll have that evaluation and feedback session and uh, continue this process of answer writing. Try to learn more about how to write good answers and uh, do better in the UPSC main section for answer writing. So, thank you very much, and we will meet again tomorrow.